just 8 years after the Revolutionary War. The wounds of independence are still fresh, the Constitution is barely inked, and the brand new United States is already facing its first internal crisis, one that will pit ordinary farmers against the Founding Fathers themselves. This is the forgotten story of the Whiskey Rebellion, when Americans who fought for liberty turned their anger toward their own government, and the President of the United States marched at the head of an army to stop them. In the early 1790s, the young nation was drowning in Revolutionary War debt. Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton had an idea: tax distilled spirits, especially whiskey. To people in the eastern cities, it was just another tax. But on the western frontier, whiskey wasn't a luxury, it was money. Farmers used it to pay debts, trade for goods, and survive harsh winters. One frontier farmer famously said, "Whiskey is our cash. You tax it, you tax our blood." The tax was unpopular everywhere, but it hit hardest in places like western Pennsylvania, where isolation and poverty made it nearly impossible to comply. Worse, disputes had to be settled in faraway Philadelphia, a journey many farmers couldn't afford. To them, the new government felt exactly like the old British one they had just defeated. By late 1791, anger was spreading. Tax collectors were confronted, threatened, and occasionally tarred and feathered, echoing the protests colonists once used against the British. Meetings formed in taverns and farms across the frontier. Resolutions were passed denouncing the tax. Some openly compared Hamilton's policy to tyranny. Meanwhile, Hamilton argued that without strong federal authority, the entire experiment of American democracy could collapse. To him, resistance wasn't patriotism, it was rebellion. This tension simmered for 3 years, until finally it exploded. In July 1794, Federal Inspector John Neville attempted to serve warrants to farmers refusing to pay the tax. An armed standoff erupted at his home, Bower Hill. Gunfire followed, houses burned, several people were killed, including Revolutionary War veteran James McFarland. McFarland's death became the catalyst. Thousands rallied. They called themselves Whiskey Boys. Some demanded independence from the young United States. Others declared the whiskey tax the Second Stamp Act. By August, nearly 7,000 armed rebels gathered near Pittsburgh, more men than Washington commanded at many points during the Revolution. The government had to act, or risk losing control of the frontier. In an extraordinary moment in American history, President George Washington personally took command of a 13,000-man militia, the largest army he ever led. Imagine it, the hero of the Revolution, now president, riding at the head of an army, not against Britain, not against a foreign threat, but against American citizens. Most rebels, shocked that Washington himself had arrived, dissolved back into the hills. There was no major battle. Instead, the rebellion collapsed under the weight of Washington's presence. 2 leaders were convicted of treason, but Washington pardoned them. The message was clear. The federal government had authority, but mercy would guide its hand. Hamilton celebrated the suppression as proof the new republic could enforce its laws. But Thomas Jefferson criticized the response, calling it an overreach against the very people who carried muskets in the Revolution. The truth lies somewhere in between. The Whiskey Rebellion revealed a tension still alive today. How do you tax a free people? How do you maintain order without crushing liberty? What happens when the government founded by rebels faces a new rebellion? The whiskey tax itself? It failed, repealed in 1802 under Jefferson's administration. But the rebellion left a permanent mark. It showed the world that the United States, this fragile experiment, had the strength to stand on its own. And it reminded Americans that democracy is loud, messy, and full of conflict, but worth fighting for. What other forgotten American uprising or hidden chapter of the nation's early years should we bring back next? Comment below and follow for more real history from the Lost and Found.